All right then. Okay, this is engaging the right way, and the three of us are going to be delivering this presentation today. Rob Beggs of Yolo County, right here. Myself, Tim Deck, Silicon Valley North, and then Adrian, which you know very well from yesterday's presentation. We're all going to be dividing up. We also have David Kane in the audience someplace here, is going to give us some information, and Jim Hoff will be maybe getting involved in some of this. So we're all members of the Conservative Caucus. Most of us are conservatives, some independent, maybe even some friends of the Conservative Caucus we like to talk about who are more progressive, that want to just get all the information and learn how to communicate better. Okay, so our agenda today is we're going to do a quick poll right at the beginning. We're going to talk a little bit about Jonathan Haidt's work. And did any of you see that presentation he did maybe five months ago or so during our national call? Are you familiar with Jonathan Haidt's work? How many are at least familiar? Okay, we're going to go through that pretty quickly because we want to get to the meat of the presentation, which is going to be talking about messaging specifically towards our carbon pricing bill. We're going to go into talk about the related values he discusses there, again, the resources on community, and then we're going to do a little bit of role play and try to give you some tips on how to respond to certain issues that will come up. So conservative outreach. First of all, I want to see how many of you don't know any or can't find any conservatives to talk to. Raise your hand. Okay, great. How many, and maybe you may see a lot of these that do, how many are you intimidated? You know of, but you're intimidated to talk to somebody who's conservative? I am, sometimes. You don't know how to talk to a conservative. You don't know the talking points, and that's really the meat of this. Okay, very good. And finally, maybe you've talked to a conservative, but there's no follow-through. You know, you've had the conversation, they like to argue with you or something, or they get it, but you know, they're not showing up to meetings. Yeah, okay, very good. So, addressing these, first of all, where to find conservatives? Habitat groups is a good place to go. They're usually mixed with progressives and conservatives. Think of like Audubon, who's been very supportive of us. Trout Unlimited also has been. Ducks Unlimited. These are just a few examples. Again, you'll get more of these in some of our resources. Rotary clubs, Alliance Club, Kiwanis. Actually, Rob's going to talk about his work with Rotary a little bit later. Gardening clubs, ski clubs. Obviously, partisan groups. So you may have a libertarian or Republican club in your area. Look them up. I actually did that. I Googled for one and joined one because I wasn't that involved. And then college Republicans and Young Americans for Liberty. And Adrian is going to be talking about that here in a bit too. And finally, friends and family. And that may not be, that's a double-edged sword. And personally, that's where I started. I have a stepfather and a stepfather-in-law and father-in-law that are very conservative, and I actually started working with them first because in some ways it's safe, but depending on your relationship, you want to be careful about that. And we have all this information again on the Growing Your Conservative membership on CCL community that talks about this and a lot of other points. So, intimidated by conservatives. The good thing I do, and the example I gave talking to my father-in-laws, is I started just by listening. I said, hey, you know, I'm involved with this organization, we're bipartisan. I wanted to get some of your insights around the topic of climate and climate change. And then I just listened, I did reflective listening, I said, it sounds like, all the things we talked about for all the other groups, including our meetings with members of Congress. And you will see, I bet you, that when you show that you're really listening by reflecting back what they said, not just parroting it, but actually understanding it, that the tone will change. And they'll be more open to maybe ask you a question. And this occurs not just with your relatives, but everybody. And I've seen it a number of times, even at tabling events. So that's the thing to do. And we'll talk a little bit about that more later. We have a really good resource on what's called motivational interviewing. And in there, there's one thing that I really like to focus on, which is They use a lot of acronyms in that group, but it's the ORs, it's open-ended questions, not just yes or no, affirmations, affirming things that there's validity in a lot they say, maybe most of it, and reflective listening, as I talked about. And so it's really as much about listening to see where can you approach, where can you find common values and so forth. Okay, and we're going to go through this pretty quickly because, like I said, I want to get towards the end where we have the meat. Jonathan Haidt's moral foundations theory. So we all have moral foundations that we use to evaluate what's fair, what's right, and it's different depending, Jonathan Haidt found, based on where you are in the political spectrum. So there's harm or care, cherishing and protecting others, fairness, cheating, rendering justice according to shared rules, in-group loyalty, or the opposite being betrayal, standing with your group, family, or nation, authority versus subversion, obeying tradition and legitimate authority, and purity, degradation, abhorrence for disgusting actions, things, or food. And what Jonathan did is he plotted this both on how important that particular moral value is, from 0 to 5, being very important, and across the spectrum from strongly liberal to very conservative. And what you see is that for progressives, fairness and harm are high in their realm of importance, where for the more conservative end of the spectrum, it's authority, purity, and in-group loyalty. And one of the things that Jonathan actually highlighted in that call is that if you look at the conservative end of the spectrum, everything is above the line there, where he actually said that conservatives appear to be a little bit more balanced in all those four, caring about those, where it's a little bit different in the more progressive end of the spectrum. So let's look at some examples. So if you talk about in-group loyalty, if you go to, maybe you're doing a speaking event, and you do a climate reality presentation, the message is going to be sent as, I'm loyal to Al Gore or that end of the political spectrum, and that may not be the best message to send. Even though the information is very valid in there, you want to be very careful about I guess you'd say, the unsaid cues you might be giving. As opposed to, let's say, talking, and I often talk about, obviously we do here too, George Shultz and his position around climate change, reflecting on how Ronald Reagan, George Shultz addressed the ozone issue back in the 90s with the Montreal Protocol, or even James Baker and some of his opinions. He's not sure this is a good one. I like what James Baker says. He's not sure how much of this is actually contributed by humans, but he still thinks, wouldn't it make sense to have an insurance policy? Same kind of thing when you think about loyalty. You're loyal to your local area, and let's say Americans or Houstonians. So when you're talking about the really bad events that are happening, instead of going maybe to Bangladesh, or as you've heard before, polar bears, think about talking about what's happening as local as possible, or at least within our nation. Authority versus subversion. Here, subversive approach to addressing something might be what you see at the bottom with the yellow vest protests. This can be a big talking point, where this appeared to be started by a fuel tax that was put in place, and where you see authority being more highly valued. You think about, these are actually troops on the southern border, and there can be an appreciation for the authority they have for protecting the laws and following the social norms. Other examples related more to climate change. This skipping school could seem more like a subversive approach to addressing the problem, where there's us going and talking respectfully to our representatives is a much more, a better message in terms of following the authority, following the social norms of doing things. And then finally, I think the other major thing is purity, sanctity versus degradation. You've got two pictures here. You've got flags in both of them. You often see eagles and patriotism and flags in messaging around the conservative end, but they're portrayed very differently here. These are scientists that are carrying the flags high in the front of their little walk parade here, and make sure I get this laser. But you still see things, you know, science trumps alternative facts in there, but they're still signaling the subliminal message of loving the nation, of respecting the purity and sanctity, where this one shows somebody effectively saying, you know, here's the US and we're going to blow up the earth with our approach. That would not be received as well. Okay, so I'm going to actually hand this off over to Adrian, and he's going to do the rest of it before we get into the role play.
Okay, so hi everyone, I'm Adrian. You probably know me from yesterday, so I'll just keep the intro short. So we're going to talk about conservative messaging on the bill in particular. So the website for our bill shows pretty clearly the 5 main selling points, which is effective, good for people, good for the economy, bipartisan, and revenue neutral. And of course, one to really emphasize with conservatives is the bipartisan aspect of it, because we have both Republicans and Democrats on board. And you can also really emphasize all the recent polling that showed that Republicans are on board with climate action, from Once Global, which showed again that 55% of Republicans want the government to regulate CO2, or 75% of Republicans under 40 support carbon fee and dividends. So kind of emphasizing that this policy is bipartisan and not just purely progressive is really important in talking to conservatives to make them feel comfortable with getting on board with the policy. Another important thing about talking to conservatives is emphasizing the economic benefits. So one of the main roadblocks to getting on board with climate action from a conservative standpoint is the idea that it'll come with some kind of economic destruction, or it'll be just complete socialism and it'll send our economy to the ruins. But you can show them the Economist statement, which has been signed by over 3,500 economists, many of which who are conservative, that says that they support carbon fee and dividend. And that's really big because it kind of addresses their concerns that the economics aren't sound when they actually are. And it's been signed by a ton of Nobel laureates, chairs of the Council of Economic Advisors, from presidents that are Obama, Clinton, but also Republican ones like Ford, Reagan, and both Bushes. So again, it's really quite a good distribution of economists across the political spectrum, and that's good to sell to them because they'll see again that economists that agree with their values are ones that are on board with this plan, and that's really key. Another thing to emphasize is the idea that Republicans have a tradition of conservation, the idea that conservation is conservative. Because a lot of Republican presidents in the past have made huge strides on climate action. For example, President Nixon started the EPA and he pioneered things like the Clean Air and Water Act. People don't really know that, but that's true. It was Nixon. And Reagan actually negotiated the Montreal Protocol, which is the most successful international environmental treaty to date. So there are these huge, big steps made by Republicans in the past. The idea that Republicans should be climate deniers is totally new. This is a thing that is a product of the 21st century, a product of polarization, of fossil fuel lobbying, not a product of conservative values. So being able to emphasize that really conservation is embedded within conservatism and that denialism has no place within traditional conservative values is really important. And this is clear evidence of that in the past, these kind of conservative figures have made huge strides on the climate. Another selling point to talk about is the idea of being responsible. A lot of conservatives are really concerned about our financial debt, where you can compare that to the climate debt. The truth is that there's really no difference in that the financial debt is leaving a burden on our children and a climate debt does the same thing. So really emphasizing that it's an idea of being fiscally responsible by maintaining our climate debt just as it is responsible to maintain our fiscal debt is really key. As you can see, we have about $23 trillion in our US national debt, and It's the same way, it's also not in our interests economically to maintain a climate debt. Things like natural disasters and flooding, these all cost, they all have an economic impact, they cost money, and we're spending billions of dollars yearly, and that's something to emphasize that for our best economic interests, it's important to settle our climate debt and make sure that none of this persists in the future. So when describing the dividend to conservatives, people may start to talk about how it's progressive and that those in the lower income brackets make more money because it's a flat dividend. But that's actually not a good way to do it, because conservatives don't really, one, don't like the word progressive, but also it's just, they're much more egalitarian in the sense that they want to see everyone treated equally, not equitably, which is the difference. So in that way, what you want to say is that people make their own choices and that those who choose to emit less will make it out better. So it's an idea of empowering the individual with conservatives that they really like. The idea that you're in charge of your own destiny and the government isn't the one deciding how well you will make it out or not. Because if you emit less, then you're going to be better off with the plan. And then for those in lower income brackets, of course, they emit less, so they end up making it out better as well. So if you're talking to a Republican member of Congress from a rural district, don't say that it's a progressive plan to help your poor farmers. Say, well, your poor farmers will end up emitting less so they can actually make it out better, so it protects your rural low-income citizens in that way. So phrase it as an idea of personal choice and the idea that they can choose to emit less and not that it's a progressive kind of wealth distribution idea. That's something you should not emphasize. So from our 4 things earlier that we pulled you guys on, the follow through with the conversation with conservatives is really creating a relationship with them. So one thing to do is to go to their meetings and go to their socials. You want to become a part of their of the county central committee. You want to go to local Republican clubs and really become embedded in their society, because when you make friends with someone, then it's much easier to talk about policy with them, because then they're more willing to listen to you, they trust you more. So building those relationships is really important. Things like meeting them for coffee and really building that rapport is important. Also, something that Tim has done is invite conservatives to our meetings in CCL, but not for them to join, but for them to just evaluate how well we do with conservatives and say, hey, can you come to our meeting and tell us how we're doing on conservative messaging? And then they'll come and they'll talk to you about it, and then you have this conversation going about conservatives in CCL, and they might even become interested in joining after that. So some resources to find more tips on conservative outreach, if you want to supplement this presentation, is online. There is a Growing Your Conservative Membership tab on the CCL website community. If you go under Leading Your Group, Growing Your Conservative Membership, and there's links to that in the handout that's going to be emailed to all of you if you all write down your email in the notebook. There's a link to this. And there's just basically summarizing a lot of the things that we've said today, among other tips and tricks to help with your conservative membership. And also, if you have just a direct question to ask conservatives, you can look at the Conservative Caucus on Community. You can ask a question. You can look at the topics of discussion and resources we have on there as well. And again, that's in Community, and you can find us there. And here is just example of that. And also, again, as you can see on the right here, there's more resources for conservative outreach. If you go to the caucus page, things like recent statements, meeting the fellows, you've met one already, good for you, and also outreach ideas for conservatives as well. So we're now going to get into examples of conservative outreach that's been successful in the past, and I will now hand it off to Rob Beggs. Yeah, we can use this.
Okay. Hello? Okay. Okay, thanks. Let's see. First, we're going to talk about outreach. So a little bit, you know, back in the April edition of the Rotarian magazine, they actually came out and they said, hey, we need to address climate change. And so several of us in the Conservative Caucus started putting together slideshows. Grant Couch did one, I took his, and I modified it, and I presented at the Woodland Sunrise Rotary, Davis Rotary, and Vacaville Rotary meetings. And it's a great place to present and talk to people because you get a lot of very community-minded people, business people, and it's a mix. It's generally conservative, but it's a mix of people. And so I got some, you know, really good comments, and I got comments, you know, from people who are just outright, you know, deniers. But it was a good forum for, you know, listening and addressing those. And you know, overall, it was very successful, and that was just recently. And so that's my example of successful outreach to conservatives.
You hear me all right? Yes, okay. I'm David Kane. I'm really pleased to be with you this morning. My mother talks about something, an aging mother, about 97 years old, and she says, well, it's as easy as falling off a log. And my story is that in where we are in Silicon Valley, North Chapter, pretty much everybody gets the idea that climate change is real, it's caused by humans, and so I thought that I would try to take the challenge of trying to unlock the Republican Party in my own way. And I sort of stumbled in something I wanted to share with you. Most areas have a central committee of the Republican Party. It's open, meets at the county building in our case, and I thought I would just go in there and hang out. And so that's the strategy, hanging out. And so as I walked in the first day to the meeting, people were socializing, there was coffee and cookies. I was a little bit afraid what was going to happen. I didn't even know what my pickup phrase was going to be. So what was I going to say? Well, I didn't know anything, and I said, well, hello, I'm Dave Kane, I'm with the Citizens Climate Lobby. Oh, somebody from the climate coming in to talk to us, or I'm curious. And so I sort of let this ride, and as it was, you know, we said, as building a relationship, as Mark Reynolds said, one thing led to the next, and so some of the dynamics that go on. Number one, in California, Republican leaders know that the Republican Party is in a disaster situation, and they want to bring new blood into the party. They're keenly interested in having Democrats come in and take a new look at the Republican Party, or more specifically, former Republicans. There's a general rule that by coming into and associating and building relationships with groups of Republicans, over maybe 10 people, you will be treated with respect. And in addition to that, there's curiosity of why I'm there, or why you could be there. And people will search you out. Eventually they will say, oh, are you a Republican? No, I'm a Democrat, but I'm interested in looking at the Republican Party for all the reasons you and I want to know. And so we go out after the Republican committee meeting, and then we go down to the pasta factory, and we eat pasta, and we sit and socialize, and you just let it happen. So what can happen? Well, first part, you have some interesting conversations because you're the climate guy, and totally incongruent with everything else that's going on. Eventually, people come down and say, you know, I really want to know some of the most curious ones. What's this all about, this climate thing? And a little bit later, some of the leaders of the Central Committee say, you know, I'm concerned about the climate, but I'm not one of those environmentalists. What can I do? Well, you can can tell me how I can get a handle on working within your party to explore an opportunity to say something individually and as a platform that's constructive on the climate. So one thing led to the next. Along the way, I was directed to a young man named Alex Blue, who's running for the Assembly District. Alex Blue came down, talked to me. I went down to his all-out endorsement of HR 763. Other things that happened is that I was recommended that I write a op-ed to a conservative online magazine called Fox and Hounds. And it was baseball season, and said, why doesn't the Republican Party throw a curveball? It's all about taking a position on climate. I was advised to go down to the Liberty Forum, which is the most Trump redneck organization of libertarians. But again, there was more than 10 people. I was treated with immense respect. Along the way, curious people came and talked to me during the tabling sessions that we all did. One of them was a highly talented conservative high school student, which you all know. So, moral of the story is, get in and hang out, build those relationships. They're not going to bite your head off. I wouldn't talk to some of those people in the parking lot, but when they're in a group setting, social bonds, you will be treated with respect, and will bring curious people out and just watch what happens. Just like falling off a wall. Thanks.
So my success story has been working on different college conservative clubs. So I am a conservative fellow with CCL, so what that means is that it's my job to reach out to younger conservatives in my area and get them on board with climate action. So I've undertaken this project of talking to conservatives at colleges. So for example, I've given talks at UC Berkeley and San Jose State to college Republicans and Young American for Liberty chapters, and just given them presentations on why they should endorse the policy of carbon fee and dividend. And basically I give them this presentation, and then there's a vote at the end from the club to see if they want to endorse the policy. And I have gotten endorsement from the UC Berkeley Young Americans for Liberty so far. And I've also been working on getting them also to join CCL. So I've gotten quite a few new members to join CCL from these college groups, because again, a lot of these young conservatives, they really want to get on board with climate action, but they just don't see a way that they can that aligns with their values. So when you give them this opportunity to get involved with climate action that is really free market, capitalistic, and conservative driven, then they're really excited. And I haven't gotten really any pushback at any of those meetings with these young conservatives, because they all know it's happening, they all know it's real, and they're all enthusiastic about it, which is really encouraging. So if we talk to more young conservatives, then we'll get a lot more engagement, because again, I haven't gotten much pushback at all from them, because they're all really excited about it. And about actually reaching out to them, they all have Facebook pages and they all have emails, and I think using both emails and Facebook messaging is a great way to get to them. Actually, all of the ones that I've gotten so far have been through Facebook message, because they check out a lot faster than email. So I would really recommend doing that when reaching out to groups, because again, kids are all on Facebook, they're on Instagram, they're on Snapchat, they're on social media a lot more than email. So using Facebook to reach out to younger people is really key, and that's something that helped me a lot in my outreach. And yeah, so that's my story.
Okay, thanks, Adrian. I was going to add one more small thing to this. This was a few years ago. Kevin Crick, who actually spoke at a CCL conference before, a NorCal conference, he was the Bay Area Vice Chair for the California Republican Party. And he and I got together, and if you look at the California Republican Party environmental policy statement on their platform, we made room for fee and dividend. I mean, it's not totally explicit, because we kind of had to get it through committee and all that, but it's in there. and it's actually been used by some of the state leaders to say, well, look, we can address climate change, and it should be market-based, and this is what our platform says. So you can get changes done. Okay, so we're going to talk. Okay, when you're meeting with conservatives, small groups or individuals one-on-one, and this is really more directed to talking to individuals than meeting with staffers or something. One thing to think about and to really give some, have some empathy and understanding is what's their position, where are they coming from, what are their fears, what are some of their fears. And some of the fears that people will give you in objections is like, well, they may be thinking, I don't really want to have to dramatically change my lifestyle. I hear all this other stuff, and it's going to really change my lifestyle. So that's one. Fear of being told what to do. This is a big one. And that's why we actually have a great solution, because it preserves choice, it preserves freedom. But that's still a fear, and they won't necessarily believe, that, oh, is this really going to preserve my choice? Or am I going to lose power over this because people are going to be telling me what to do with every aspect of my life? Fear of having to admit to being wrong. This is a big one, because a lot of people have staked their position. This is their tribe. We don't want to have to change. Fear of having to accept a position from others who you disagree with about most other things politically too. So again, it's kind of going back to the us-them tribal stuff that's been going on. And fear of losing your identity and position in your tribe. And it's important, to think about these and have empathy to the person you're talking to, because they're dealing with this. And so, you don't want to step on all these. You want to just be very gentle and, gradually move them out of this. Okay, now what we're going to do, we're going to have a little fun here. I've actually gotten a number of objections over the years when I've been tabling at, Republican state meetings, or just, talking to staff members of conservative members of Congress, stuff like that. So I'm going to throw out some objections, and we're going to ask the audience to give a possible response to them. And there's no right or wrong answer, but we're also going to, Adrian and maybe Tim are maybe going to ask you some questions and coach a little more about, even going a little farther on that. So, I'm just going to throw this out, and if you want to answer it, raise your hand, and Tim will bring you the microphone. How do you know what the right temperature is? Wouldn't there be more food-growing areas if the Earth was warmer?
Okay. John?
Shouldn't have raised my hand so quick. I had a half idea. So first, it sounds like your concern is that the sort of science on this is not necessarily totally settled, or can you say a little bit more about what your concerns are about this?
Okay. No, that's good. That's, anyone else want to try to answer that?
Oh, dang it. I thought when in doubt, listen.
Okay. And I'm not going to answer back on these. This is just take your shot, and then we've actually got another slide that's going to kind of talk about elements of the approach. So that's good.
And
that's
good. He didn't go and start arguing. He was doing reflective listening, what he thought he heard. And even if it was incorrect, then he would correct him in that.
So it's very interesting. I think we share a value about the need for food. The world is facing a food shortage, and we too are very concerned about food. But I think one of the things that raises concern for me and the CCL is the net effect on food production. That the science indicates, yes, there will be some areas that are more temperate and better food growing areas, but we may lose so many other areas that traditionally have been good for growing food that the world may have a net loss. And I think we have to work together to understand, how this plays out.
Okay. That was good, and especially good you acknowledged it, you acknowledged the topic and the concern, and then, yeah.
And the elements of truth in
Yeah.
what he was saying. That's good.
Okay, I'm going to go on. CO2 concentrations have been far higher in the past when the Earth was actually colder. This is one of Tom McClintock's favorites.
Be brave.
Any takers? Come on.
No takers?
I'm glad to see that you've been looking at some of the science. That's good. When you've looked at some of the science, how far back in the future are you thinking of when the carbon dioxide was higher than it is now?
Okay, and I would say 500 million years ago. So that's, okay, so you acknowledged it and you understood the question, so that's pretty positive. Anybody else on that one? Okay, let's try another. Oh,
Yeah, not enough responses on this one. So I would say that's very interesting. What do you think that higher CO2 concentration, what effect do you think that had on climate? What effect do you think it's having today?
great, follow-up question, that's good.
Another hand.
Yeah, it's true that there's been this, a lag between CO2 and temperature. If we go back into the far history of the Earth, would you be interested in pursuing this further with where current climate scientists are at? There's a really complicated discussion around this, and you're right to hit on that point. Would you be willing to join in on a discussion around this and wonk out a little bit more?
So that's a good approach, but you're asking them a yes/no question, which is a little bit risky. But your approach is good.
That's the O, open-ended question in the orders process.
Eventually, okay, I'm going to throw it. Eventually, the government is just going to keep all the money or waste it on pet programs. Look what's happening with cap and trade revenue in California. Anybody?
Mentioned the dividend intent.
Anybody new? Who has it?
I'm glad you brought that up. That's a very valid point. They're using the cap and trade funds for things like the bullet train that may not bring a benefit for many years. And also, that shows a big difference between our bill and some of the other bills like cap and trade. Because our bill, the government doesn't keep any of the money, and it gives the money back to people to make their own decisions on how to spend it and how to conserve energy at their level.
Yeah, that's good.
It sounds like one of the issues you have is who can you trust? And I'd like to hear more about this in terms of how we can work together in a solution. Trust is very important to you.
Okay, that's pretty good. Getting a little bit tangential, but yeah, pretty good. Okay, let's try something else. California fires got out of control because of poor forest management over the decades, not climate change.
You're absolutely right that there has been poor forest management, but climate scientists think that there's maybe more than one factor that are exacerbating California fires: poor management and climate change. So there could be more than one factor. I think we need to work on both of those problems.
Okay,
Don't you agree?
yeah, no, it was good that you acknowledged that, and you did have, the science and references behind it. Part of the issue is how do you introduce that? And instead of a but, come back, think about how you'd introduce that in the conversation. Okay. I've got a whole bunch here. It's just a tax that will make things more expensive and hurt the economy.
Well, it would hurt the economy. If you think about the way that the economy works, if the price goes up on something, then people will buy less of it. And so to reduce emissions, what we have to do is overall buy less. Now thinking about the people who it's going to affect, if you put money back in their pockets, it's not really a tax so much. It's a little bit of freedom.
Good words.
And I think what you can mention at the beginning when you say it'll hurt the economy and hurt companies, what you can mention is that it's actually been endorsed by oil companies as well. So yeah, it'll be hurting them, but they've even endorsed the policy. So even though it might hurt their profits, they're on board with it as well.
I'm also very concerned about the economy, but would you be interested in reading about work of a bunch of economists who actually think there could be solutions that benefit the economy while also solving this problem?
Okay, so it's good you had the answer. Same comment as Bill, but, and so think about how you weave that in. So let's go.
We've got 3 minutes left.
Let's go to the next slides here. Okay, so addressing objectives. These are objections. Sorry, these are things that I kind of came up with. You wouldn't necessarily use all these, but in this order. But think about how you have empathy with the person you're talking about. How you want to take your time, and it's not your position versus their position. So become their friend, accept them as they are. Acceptance is really important. Acknowledge the objections and the element of truth, and a lot of you were doing that, and that's great. Be interested, ask for more details. I think a couple of you asked follow-up questions, so ask for more details so they get to elaborate on it. And a lot of times when people elaborate on it, they kind of get less sure, of exactly, it's totally right. So maintain a sense of curiosity. You're really interested in them and their beliefs, and they'll pick up on that. Ask what it would take for the person to consider an alternative perspective. And some of you kind of talked about that. I mean, you had an approach like that. As you're talking, try to discern what would motivate them, whether it's tribal, moral, economic, future generations, science. If you could get a sense of that in your discussion, that's really good. Then you can offer them a reference. Instead of, but these scientists say this. It's like, yes, I used to think that was a strong possibility, whatever their position is. But then I read this, or I went to Skeptical Science, and they had an in-depth article, or whatever. Have some reference, whether it's to, a tribal leader, someone leader who would be considered part of their tribe, any of those things. So think about, you just offer them a reference. You're not necessarily trying to prove that they're wrong. Be positive and excited about the CCL solution. It's just like, wow, we've got this great solution. They're like, but you stay excited, and then when, later on when you're done talking, they're going to go, wow, they're really excited about that. So be positive, excited about the CCL solution rather than countering their arguments. And then lastly, I know a lot of people don't think about this. If you're getting objections, they're engaged. It's when you're not getting objections, they're not engaged. Ask them for more objections. And that's like, but then, what else would concern you about something like this? Or, so these are just some ideas, and it was great. Some of you had some of these in answers to questions, but consider these when you're, especially when you're one-on-one or just small group with other, conservatives or folks who are, not supporters of the type of thing we're trying to do.
Okay, we're at the top of the hour. This is the official end. If you want to get that information with all the links, I think the notebook, where's the notebook? Okay, over there. Maribel, if you could maybe bring it up here and people could sign it rather than trying to pass it around if you didn't get to it. Conservative Caucus site, we will stay around for as long as we're allowed to answer questions. What? We do? Oh, awesome!
Well, we can go farther. Hey,
I guess
this
I
is
can't read time.
this is something. If you go to the Skeptical Science website, they have skeptic arguments, and they have a list of all the objections that people have submitted, and they have links to technical answers to all of those. Now, like I said, you want to be careful. You don't want to just shoot right back with a technical answer. You want to introduce it gently. But I just wanted to show that page because it's really a great resource. I didn't realize we had that much time either.
I know, okay, this is
Going
great.
on
This is
objection.
fantastic. Yeah, go ahead.
So this is, if you go to the Skeptical Science website, what this is actually a screen capture from the website. And this just shows a list of every skeptic argument encountered online, as well as how often each argument is used. And so these are the frequency, and so the most common argument is, well, the climate's changed before. And 4.3% of people thought that was the most common argument they heard. Or that's what they've encountered online when they searched online. It's not the sun. It's the sun. And you do run into that. I ran into that actually, yeah, with Doug Malfa's staffer. It's like, it's the sunspots, you know? And yes, there's an element of truth in that. And so, you know, you have to acknowledge, yes, you know, sunspots are a factor. And you don't say but you keep talking and then introduce, you know, references or other leaders. It's not bad. That's really common. You'll get, especially when you're talking to, it's like, well, doesn't seem that one to me, you know, it's not so bad. And so then, you know, you kind of have to go through, and they've got links to what some of the things you can introduce, references and talking points you can introduce when you address that. So all these, you know, these are things you may get, and then you've got a resource where you can introduce references and introduce other things as you become their friend, and, you know, they trust you more. So.
All right, very good. Now I'm going to do the thing we modeled. Is I'm going to be interested, since we have this time, we can do some Q&A, maybe talk about common objections you get and try to give you some responses to that, or any other questions you have. Yes, Don.
Yeah, I spoke to the Fresno Downtown Rotary group and a number of conservatives in the audience. Their first question was, you know, you've got your scientific experts, we have our scientific experts, they're not saying the same thing as you are, and I try to quote, you know, NASA and National Academy of Sciences, etc. But I'm thinking a different tack might be, yeah, I wish I could believe that we could keep on doing what we're doing and proliferating like we are, but when I read NASA, when I read National Academy of Sciences, and this is an honest statement for me, it makes me concerned. And that's the reason I'm doing this, because, you know, I like you, I wish we'd just keep doing what we're doing, but these climate scientists are saying things that really concern me, and I don't know, does that concern you? No,
Yeah,
what do you think?
And that's good. Sometimes what I've tried to do is actually, I'll read the references. Actually, if you want to see something really interesting, I think there's Heartland Foundation? Yeah. Heartland Institute, they put, they had a conference this summer, and they had kind of the top denier scientists, you know, at that conference. And you can actually watch videos from that. It's still online. And then you can go to Skeptical Science, and you can dig deeper. I know this doesn't work, but you can, the way you framed it was good. It was that you can kind of go, yeah, I used to think that was a possibility, or I read Roy Spencer, and I think he's a great scientist for the way he's figured out this and this. And then I read further. I read the NASA, report, and it kind of raised my concern. So so the way you approached it was good.
Another possible answer to that specific question, you might have heard it in the conference already, like James Baker said, I'm not sure, but if there's a chance it's right, we should have an insurance policy.
And yeah, that's
and I heard you say, well, some scientists say this, some scientists say that, I was thinking the insurance policy argument might be what you want to say.
So if you can acknowledge that they have read this, and you can say, I've heard that too. And so I dug deeper, and I'm concerned about the risk, And I don't doubt that this person you're quoting, is a good scientist. I'm just concerned about the risk I've read from these other sources.
Thanks. I've had the opportunity to speak to a couple Rotary clubs in our area, and I have two questions about that. The first is, it seems like in a lot of these conservative groups, the first question you get in the discussion is from somebody who wants to deny the climate science, and it sucks all the energy out of the room, and you spend a lot of time trying to deal with that. Do you have any good ways of acknowledging that and moving past it so that you can get more fruitful discussion with other people who are maybe interested in solutions but are shut down by that?
So specifically, like, how do they frame that? Or okay.
I know exactly what you're talking about, and the way I handle it is, that's a good question. It's really not enough time to talk about it in this talk, but I'd be very glad to talk about it afterwards or make an arrangement to meet you or something. And usually they just say, I don't really want to do that. But at least that stops it, and I haven't, I'm not going to answer that. I said, I'm very glad to answer that, but I've only got 20 minutes. And so I have to talk about that, and that works.
Yeah, the other thing, I do use 2 science slides that are very good because you can't really, they're just in your face. And one is pictures of the Arctic ice change or Arctic ice photos. You can get those online, from 30 years ago versus last year. And again, you don't say you're wrong. You go, that's a good point. I looked into this some more on my own, and I think this is a thing. And so you're just giving them your opinion, but yet you're still diffusing it because it's like, I've looked into this, and I think I'm concerned about this. So it's not it's not that you're wrong. It is a problem. It's that, well, I'm concerned about this. And the other one I've used is there's a plot of California's summer minimum temperatures. It's really dramatic over the last 40 years. It's gone up like 5 degrees. The nighttime temperatures, the low temperatures. And that's what you'd expect from climate change is the nighttime temperatures going up. And it's dramatic. So.
We have somebody here.
Hi, I'm Deirdre Henderson from the North Tahoe chapter. I have been in meetings with staff of our member where they bring up the 97% of climate scientists statistic, and they tell us that they've read all of them and they really don't say what people who cite that statistic say they say. How do you deal with something like that?
There is, on Skeptical Science, they do have answers for that. I don't see it here, but if you go to the website, I found it on their website. They talk in detail about the 97% and about that argument. In your particular district, the one thing I found they have been were most alarmed about a couple of years ago were all the dying trees. And so I don't know how you deflect around to that. You just say, I understand what you've read about the 97%. The other thing you can do is, I happen to know the person that actually compiled or co-compiled that study. He's a very fine, upstanding, local scientist, and appreciate your concern. He really does things right, and that's Dana Uchitelli. And you can look at what's on Skeptical Science. I don't know if that helps, but you have a challenging district. Yes.
And I wanted to add, if you look at number 4 on the list where it says there is no consensus on skeptical science, that would address that.
Oh, there it is.
Yeah.
Yes, there it is.
Now you have a question on there.
Yeah, that's my concern, no consensus. So, as a kid, I grew up in Michigan, Ann Arbor, and my track coach, I was on a track team. My track coach was a graduate student in kinesiology, and we become friends over the years. And he's in Canada. He's been posting these things about, that it's not real, climate change is not real. And I finally said, look, you're a smart guy. You have a PhD in kinesiology. Every time I look at all these contrary, that it's not based on, that it's a hoax, the scientific evidence is saying it's a hoax. If I dig down, like Spencer and all those people, if I dig down deeper every time, it's always roots down to petroleum industry's funding. Like, don't you believe, don't you, when you do your research, look at who's funding this research? And if you, every time, I look in, I read that stuff too, but every time it comes right down to the Heartland Institute. It comes down to petroleum industry. So what do you think of that argument? Is that too
I mean, if you have a reference that shows that very strongly, that you can say, I understand what you're saying, and I think that's a valid thing to look at. And I was concerned about that too. And then I read this, and this is what it said. So, if you turn it into, this is your opinion, and from digging deeper, this is what you found. And the other thing I just want to throw out, it's interesting, even Roy Spencer, if they pull him out and use him as an example, he's come out and he said, yeah, global warming is real. He just thinks the sensitivity factor is 1. I think now his data is showing it's 1.5, it keeps creeping up. But, even some of these scientists, they're past the point of, no, it's not us, no, it's not happening. It's just like, well, the climate's not as sensitive as what the other 90% is. So.
Yes, I lead the National Action Team, or co-lead the National Action Team on presenting. And one of the things we talk a lot about is avoiding the science trap completely. Our strong suit is solution. And when you consider having a conversation or making a presentation, consider taking all the science out. Because the demographics show that people really are interested in what can we do about it. Now, it can come up, but what I say is this is great, but once you go into that trap, we just got trapped right now by the science trap. So I would urge you to frame, we talk about framing the discussion around the solution and managing it from there. This is an input, and I think.
Yeah, I just want to add a tiny bit to that. Keep in mind that the reason why these denial science finds so much purchase with these people, the real psychological motivation is that they fear the solution. That, I'm going to have to change my lifestyle, it's going to destroy the economy. Keep in mind that that's the really motivating factor. So kind of like you suggest, try to find a way to segue away from that, it's not the subject of my talk. Talk about the solutions, and how it, doesn't demand lifestyle changes that, economists agree it won't harm the economy too much. And I think for at least some of the people in the audience, maybe not a few of the diehards, but that'll really loosen the grip, of that denial science on them, I think.
So, let me say one more thing too, sorry. The other thing is, if you're talking too much, you're talking too much. Like I said, what I first did is I didn't talk at all. I asked questions, I drilled down. You keep asking till you get to these values that he's saying what it really is, you can get there. Get there first, before you try to convince them of your position. with your data or our policy or anything like that. So, go ahead, Devin.
And
I wonder if I could say a few words about our recent successes in Fresno.
yeah, go for it.
Yeah. For years, we've been trying to engage conservatives in Fresno, and this year we finally had some success. And one thing I did was, like he was saying, I think going to a Republican Central Committee meeting. I went to 2, talked to the chair. He was a very nice man, his t-shirt. We later had a phone conversation. Then the second meeting I went to, he said, sorry, we're not going to do this. Well, that's fine. So I wrote a letter to the Fresno Bee. He said, I'm looking for conservatives who are concerned about climate change. I put it out there. With my email, all right? I got 3 responses. That doesn't sound very much, but it's a start, okay? So then each of these people, or at least 2 of them, I said, let's meet for lunch or breakfast. So we met for breakfast and talked. You have to be personal with each one. If you're going to gather a group, you have to be personal, okay? Then we were at the Juneteenth celebration we were tabling, and a fellow named Pastor Carter came by. He's an evangelical minister. He got real interested. And he said, well, why don't you come down to our Bible study and do presentations? So we did that, and we've been meeting with him ever since. We've been putting together a real easy PowerPoint. He said, you have to be very, very basic starting with this. He's going to go out to the churches and talk about this. And it turns out that he's on the Republican Central Committee. Okay, he gives the invitations. He meets every month. He has breakfast with the chair. Okay, so he's got all these connections. And also, I forgot to mention, when I was at the Republican Central Committee, I saw a couple of young folks over here, so I went and talked to them and said, hey, are you concerned about Jonathan Jason? Well, sure, yeah. So, Pastor Carter, I said, you know this young woman that I met on, I said, sure, she's a friend. And so he went and talked to her, and she came over to my house, and we talked some more. And so my point is that, little by little, you start gathering. It turns out that when we got this started, Connie told me, well, there's already a few conservatives in the group, the pilot and Micheline's husband, he's a conservative. And bring these people in, so now we've got like 6 or 7 people, meet once a month or so, trying to figure out ways to reach out to other conservatives.
So that was great, thanks.
So sorry, I missed some of the beginning of this session, so I hope this question doesn't go over something you've already gone over. But so I'll just say that I'm left of center and sort of hopelessly grounded in values of justice and equity that is often the case on the left. And I know that people on the right often are grounded in different values and a different worldview. And so like the thing that I struggle with when I try and reach to people who have different political ideology is I just worry that I'm just going to use the wrong words and the wrong concepts because I'm just so grounded in my worldview. And so I'm curious, are there, but I'm an empathetic person. I can understand that people are different than me and that they have different, values and worldviews. But how do I get my head into that conservative worldview and value system? Are there, is there a thing I could listen to, or a movie I should watch, or a book I should read, or just something that just gets my mind into thinking, oh, I understand. Here I can understand what the world looks like to a conservative, so that when I speak to them, I can come from their point of view and not my hopelessly left point of view.
Well, thank you for coming and affirming our entire presentation at the beginning. Yes, so we talked about the Jonathan Haidt values for progressives on the spectrum. So you can see how valuable that is. We went really quickly because we're getting to the meat, the details here. But there's more to explore there, and there's a lot of YouTube videos you can look at too that talk about those value judgments and so forth. And up front here.
If you're interested in reading a book, there's Strangers in a Strange Land by Harley Russell Huckshield, which is pretty good. She spent 5 years in Louisiana trying to understand that question. But,
yeah. And Jonathan Haidt's book is The Righteous Mind, I believe it's called.
Yeah, that's right. And I sort of,
well, I live in Berkeley. We live in Berkeley. Yes, we have a conservative. I think they would generally agree with the premise that they would be
in favor of doing something. I don't know if it's cap and trade or, you know, dividend, you know, carbon tax, but I would like to know your suggestions about who to reach out to. That would make a difference. So if we're talking about legislative changes, I'm not sure how much convincing Bay Area people about the right course of action would have an impact on legislation and passing, and suggestions on who to talk to or what to do.
Yeah, I mean, business endorsements would certainly help. That might actually be a good question for Tony.
And then, I mean, you know, you need to start somewhere first. It may be low-hanging fruit that you want to get your success with, and they may not be an influencer, but as you know, David did here, and Devin, you work through the chain through that. And again, this takes time. I know we want to convince somebody to go away to get it, but it takes quite a bit of time. So once again, at the beginning where we talked about where to find conservatives and groups, start there, and then we'll work through. Let's see, where's the other mic? Oh, that, yeah.
Question about trusted messengers. I think a lot of the time when I see us talk about, this might actually be Adrian, is that your name? I apologize, I've heard it like 10 times, but I still forget, I apologize. A lot of times when I see us talk about conservative trusted messengers, I see people, I'm turning 29 in a couple weeks, so I'm 28, and I see people that might be 3 times my age as the people that we talk about as the collection of trusted messengers for conservatives. And so I'm curious, especially if we're working with younger conservatives, is the sort of value set such that sort of older people will naturally be the trusted messengers, or are there trusted messengers that resonate more with younger conservatives?
That's a great question.
Yeah, so we have a conservative fellowship program that has about 10 conservative fellows nationwide in different locations geographically. So I'm one of them, and I'm here in California. So our job is basically to be that trusted messenger to talk to other conservatives that are younger. So that's why I've done things like the college conservative clubs outreach, because you know I am about their age, a little younger, but I'm also conservative, and then they'll see my point of view. So we are working on that by getting more young conservatives. So you know, if any of you need a trusted messenger, I mean, you can always get in touch with me, and I'm here locally, and I can definitely be that younger trusted messenger if that's wanted.
I guess I'll like invoke the AOC, the specter of AOC in the conservative conversation. But I'm curious, is there like an equivalent of like an AOC, Ilhan Omar, like those types of people? Are there equivalents of those in conservative spaces that we can look to sort of say like, oh look, here are these prominent young conservatives that have, like, if we can't reach you and we need a quote for like, I don't know, whatever, hey, check out what this conservative AOC did. Are there any of those that we could, those types of names that we can Google, follow on Twitter, pull on their discussions?
Yeah, I think Representative Matt Gaetz, he's quite young. He's, I think, in his like 30s or 40s, and he's huge on climate. He actually drafted the Green Real Deal, which is the Republican response to the Green New Deal. So he definitely has lots of posts, Matt Gaetz. And that's the only one that comes to mind right now. But on the handout that you guys are going to get emailed to you, there's a link to a bunch of quotes from different conservatives. Some of them old, some of them young. So there's a link on the trusted messengers part where there's a bunch of quotes. The youngest I can think of at the moment is Matt Gaetz, but there are definitely others that are not coming to mind right now.
And those organizations over there, Students for Carbon Dividends, bingo. The bottom one, I think, is a relatively new one. I think that was started by, she was just on our call from Alaska, Yale, conservative. I'm an old person, I can't remember. Anyway, she helped start that one, and it's a young group, so check those out. This is what you'll be getting in your mail.
I have a question. Okay, so I was a flaming Democrat, then I was a flaming Republican, and now I'm not registered with anybody. So I have friends on both sides of the aisle, mostly liberal, but I have family and friends who are conservative. And they are very comfortable financially. And one of the things that you said, no, we won't have to change our lifestyle, but the reality is we will. How do you approach that with people who are quite comfortable in their life? And when I say, I'm at the CCL conference, they said, oh, that's good for you. And it's like, really? Okay, so this is a question, not really. Yeah, I guess. How do you approach people who are financially comfortable in their life, they're older, and, you know, so what? Do they have to change their life? And what do we say about it?
And I didn't, when I put up that one slide with fears, that's a fear that some people have. And it wasn't, oh, maybe not to them. Okay.
So people have, yes, you do have choice. With your dividend, for example, you could put that in your 5-liter Mustang Classic that you like to drive around on the weekend and pay for the gas there. You still have that choice, but part of the reason we do the fee is because of, and this is the economics term of it, is there's a market distortion where we're not paying for the negative impacts. And again, the thing to do is explore, you know, do you see any impacts from climate change? Maybe they don't. And maybe as you dig down into that, we can say, well, what, you know, there's clearly going to be impacts. And as we talked about, there's going to be debt. You know, when we have to take care of Houston for $50 billion, that's a real cost. And there's personal harm too, not just money, that people will get afflicted with. And so there's going to be transitions in the economy. We're going to let the transition happen when we take care of the market distortion and pay for our usage of fossil fuels. I also like to say, when you talk, acknowledge the immense benefit of fossil fuels have had in our lives. We would not be anywhere in terms of our standard of living today if it wasn't for that. And I think that's also a key message to say that you don't hate that, you hate the effects of overuse and the output of it as a problem.
And can I add something? The other thing, obviously, you care about the future and minimizing the risk to, you know, future generations. And if you express that, you know, well, I really care about the risk from this to, you know, future generations, you know, your grandkids or nieces, nephews, whatever. And then you can just kind of lay that out there. And I don't know if they would respond to that or not, but they probably also likely care about future generations. And that's, you know, kind of the approach to see. You know, just leave that out there, and they may or may not be engaged. But
I have another response.
Let her. She was next.
I don't have a problem finding conservatives. We live on the Front Range of Colorado, near Colorado Springs. And because of a different civic leadership position that I hold in public education, I actually do attend a number of gatherings, Kiwanis, where there were 85 people, and have been invited to a monthly coffee with a group of 7 other people. I'm wondering if anybody in another leadership position has any solutions to how do you have that initial conversation about climate change, given that your topic is usually something different, and even within an environment like at Kiwanis where there were jokes being made and whatnot. What are the initial inroad statements or questions that you could ask in a situation like that?
So, yeah, I think it's fair to state, to tell people, you know, if there's some event or something, you know, say, I'm concerned about future risks of more of this. And again, it's you and it's your concern. You're not necessarily denying them or getting in an argument with them. It's your concern. And then, you know, over time, maybe that evolves into a more thorough discussion over time.
And also, if you remember how Dave came was talking about how he just came in and said, hi, I'm Dave, I'm from the Citizens Climate Lobby, and now they're interested. So you can just start with that as well.
Yeah, that's true. Just go straight to the point.
Another response to comfortable friends. to me it seems that the impact of the legislation would be that you will pay a little bit more for certain things. Well, if you're well off, that has no impact on your lifestyle. In fact, you can feel like you can enjoy your lifestyle without making any changes and feel good about it because you're contributing financially to mitigating, to paying the full cost of your lifestyle, which is okay. That's a personal choice. So if you want to, enjoy that lifestyle and pay for it. Is that an okay response?
Well, I mean, there's choice. The choice thing, I think, is key. Freedom of choice, liberty, which actually is another component of Jonathan Hunt's thing, where we didn't talk about that, is an important component to talk about. There's going to be market dynamics, always. I mean, how many people miss their BlackBerry? That's terrible what happened to BlackBerry, huh? But, how many people hate driving an electric car because it's quiet and it has great acceleration, you don't have to change the oil. So yeah, things are going to change. We're just correcting the market distortion again, and we're taking out an insurance policy. There's lots of great information, especially in these new climate voices. Bob Inglis, Jerry Taylor, and a couple of other, Catherine Hayhoe. They do short vignettes in there, good talking points, and of course Catherine Hayhoe's Global Weirding series. I've used those with my family when they brought up volcanoes, for example, and shared that, and they watched it, and they were really interested in that. So,
I have one here. I'm a complete new guy.
Okay.
This is my first conference, but something came to mind was I went to a talk by Paul Hawken, and in some of his books he said you tax the things you don't want, so you can remove some of the tax liabilities on things that you do want. So now our government is run essentially on tax on labor, to a lesser extent tax on capital. This is a tax, but it is giving money back to people that will remove some of their tax liabilities and will enable them to contribute to the economy. So, and we're taxing what we don't want, which is more carbon going into the atmosphere. So that dichotomy of taking some tax responsibility from the traditional means and putting it on something that's definitely a negativity in the environment could be a positive thing.
Yeah, and that's a great point, and that's a very libertarian point also.
And now we're really out of time, so I'm glad we had this opportunity for this great Q&A session. So again, if you didn't, wherever that notebook is, if you didn't get a chance to put your name on it, we'll be able to send this to you with all those great links. The slides, we'll have it. We'll probably have it in the depository for all the regional conference slides. Yeah, so you can get access to that. Well, it'll either be from me or it'll come from maybe Jim Tolbert of our National Conservative Caucus group. So if it has a Citizens Climate Lobby extension on it, don't throw it away. Okay, thank you very much, everybody. We really appreciate it. And go out there and talk to some conservatives.